In this episode of Two Tall Guys Talking Sales, Sean O'Shaughnessey and Kevin Lawson take on one of the most convenient excuses in sales. We lost on price. They argue that most lost deals are not really price problems. They are value, messaging, qualification, and sales process problems hiding in plain sight. You will hear why serious sales teams should analyze lost opportunities by stage, dollar value, customer fit, and actual cause, not just by the explanation written in the CRM. Stay with us because this conversation may help you find the leaks in your pipeline before they quietly become your revenue plan.
Thank you for coming back to Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. This is Sean. Kevin's going to be talking here in a second. I just want to start the conversation out with Kevin and I on a little topic that I think is obvious for anybody that is listening, has been in sales for any amount of time. You probably don't win 100% of your deals. So I'm just going to say right now, if you win 100% of your deals, go to the next podcast, whatever that one is, go to the sports station, whatever. You don't need to listen to this conversation. However, if you occasionally lose, then this is a conversation that I think might be helpful for most of you out there, because I occasionally lose a deal. Kevin, I assume you occasionally lose a deal. So it's important to figure out why. And I'm going to tell you, or I'm going to surmise that you will learn more from analyzing your lost deals than analyzing your won deals. So when you win, you did enough things correctly to win the deal. When you lost, you probably didn't do enough things correctly to win the deal because you lost. Now, there's always the case that the customer just simply stopped and that you couldn't have anticipated that. So I'm not going to worry about that. I'm also not going to worry about the made up scenario that we lost due to price, because when you lose due to price, you probably lost because you didn't provide enough value to the customer. That's just my surmising. What do you think, Kevin?
I'm going to actually go against the grain here. I'm going to say if somebody's winning 100% of the deals, you actually need to go prospect more because you're not prospecting enough. If you're winning 100%, holy cow, there are deals you're missing. You should be losing some deals. But that's tongue-in-cheek kind of stuff. I really like the idea of thinking through why you lose deals at the intentionality level, because it's not no decision. No decision is a cop-out because, to your point, that either you didn't have enough value and you lost to someone else who's outsold you, or you didn't educate the customer enough along the way to help them see your value or to see their problem and pain in enough depth to where they could say, you know what, the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. As a salesperson, if you don't establish, I call it the delta, the difference between the pain of staying the same and the pain of change, there will never be a deal. It's no different than saying, hey, if you don't have dollars and you don't have pain, you don't have a deal. And that's what we're saying here. So when you're losing deals, let's get a little tactical, because at the high level, it's, are we analyzing the deals? But at the tactical level, are we capturing the data that matters in written format consistently so we can do analysis? It's the whole reason why sports teams watch game film. You need to know what the other team's doing well. You need to know what you're doing well. You need to know what the other team's doing poorly and what you're doing poorly. It allows you to get better. And that's what Two Tall Guys is all about. We're providing value to you, the seller, the sales leader, that helps you sell more. And a fun way of saying that's make more money, have more fun.
Totally agree with that. I love the idea of making more money. Having more fun, that's up to you on your personal time. But yeah, let's try to work on, let's make more money. And this is why you should analyze your lost deals. So let's just say, and most people probably say, I lose 30% of the time. Some people say they lost 70% of the time. But let's just say you lose 30% of the time. If you could turn that into 15% of the time, then you could significantly increase your revenue, right? That would mean you would increase revenue 15%, which would be a significant change. It may be more than what you expect to grow from one year to the next year. So understanding how you lose and why you lose is incredibly important. So I think we built the case fairly well I'm going to go back to that one thing. You don't lose a deal on price. No salesperson ever loses a deal on price.
And before we move on, let's make sure that we talk about when you lose the deal, like what stage, because what Sean and I are talking about is not losing a deal in the marketing qualified lead or sales accepted lead stage. We're talking about scoping, because discovery, you should be disqualifying deals. We're talking about once you get to the scoping and proposing and proof of concept, quoting, negotiating, that's where we're talking about. We're not talking about, hey, I sent them an email and never responded. So get that out of your mind. So where you lose is as important as how many or how much. So Sean, we should also talk about dollars versus count. And I always contend for somebody who's never done this before, measure both. If you do 100 proposals a year, know how many out of those 100 you win. If you do $100,000, $100 million, whatever your dollar amount is, know that number too. Because you may find out that you win 80% of deals over a very high dollar amount, and you may lose 80% of deals under a certain dollar amount. So now you're starting to figure out, where do I play? And again, that's why we do the work, to know where we want to play.
That's right. Yeah. And that's a really good point. I'm not talking about, I met a customer at a show, at a seminar, at an event, and they didn't buy. That's not a loss, right? Because you didn't try. I'm talking about the ones where it's on your forecast. Maybe you lost it before you put it on your forecast, or maybe it was forecasted for next month or next quarter, next year, maybe. But I'm not talking about the ones that we really don't even have a good proposal in front of them yet, or we haven't done any of that. So I'm not talking about those. I'm also not talking about the ones where we think we lost on price, because the price conversation is a conversation about value and the value that you bring to the customer. Do they know it? Kevin said it really well. I'm big on the gap analysis too. It is an old strategic selling chart. It's been around since mid 80s when strategic selling was written. They put the chart in the book and they talked about the gap, where you are, where you want to be. What's that gap? If it's not big enough, then you aren't going to get a deal. And that's really the issue. How have we built enough value, a big enough gap? We've set the customer up so that they are expecting to get better. They're expecting to grow their revenue, cut their costs, whatever the case may be. Now, this is an important conversation, because when you start doing analysis on your lost deals, what you're really saying is, why didn't we build enough up a gap? Why didn't we do that? And potentially, why didn't the customer understand that we did? We may have built enough gap in our opinion, but the customer didn't believe it. Maybe it's because we weren't at the right level with the company. We weren't talking to the right people. We hadn't delivered the message to the right people. We're counting on somebody else to deliver the message to the CFO, and we weren't talking to the CFO. Pretty much you there, but trying to figure out why you didn't do it. And go back to my first statement, or my earlier statement. You didn't do enough things to build enough value.
When that happens, what happens to your pipeline? Because I'm a firm believer that the devil is in the details. You have to know your numbers. I remember working in a business, this is back in my W-2 life, where we identified that our middle level managers, our mid managers, people who were managing people, not managers of teams. So the mid level managers that were managing customer facing teammates, they had a lack of data. And this kind of points back to why we're not doing analysis. And they realized they were really busy. And so some of the things that we saw in the business, that they were always asking for more people, more hourly workers, more customer facing units. And we started really digging into the numbers of knowing why that's happening. Why do they always feel pressure, compressed, short on time, short on resources, stretched? Those are common words you hear. And if you're feeling that now in your business, any of you listeners out there, this is the time to go hit the pause button and go, wait a minute, do I know my numbers? Do I know my quote hit rates? Do I know where my leakage is happening? Do I know why I'm losing, why I'm winning, why? Don't ask the 5 whys, ask the 500 whys when you don't know what's going on in your business. All that back to say, working with that company allowed us to start really digging into who we were quoting to and not winning regularly. That allowed us to say, you know what, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, we don't win a whole lot with you. I'm curious about why. Is it something we're doing wrong? What's the problem here? Because we're spending a lot of calories on you and you're not spending any dollars with us. And all of a sudden, we got really busy and our close rate started to go up because we understood what the problem was by asking better questions when we did the analysis of why we were losing business. And that applied to us in a distribution format. It applies to me in a consulting format. It applies to you all listeners in a tech sales, manufacturing sales, distribution sales. Anywhere you're selling, you need to know why you are and are not winning. So if you lose in the scoping versus if you lose in the negotiation, those are probably two different reasons. And if you say price for both, you're wrong because you're not pricing in scope. You're pricing after scope and proof of value and proposal and test close. There's a lot more steps there. So if all you're doing is, listen up closely, Sean, I know you'll love this. If all you're doing is emailing your quote, that's the problem. If you're not scheduling a proposal meeting to point out specifics, that's the problem. Know why you're losing. So if you see your heat map of, hey, I lose 50% of my losses in the proposal phase, dig into your proposals. Find out from your losses, from your wins, what resonated with your customers. That's a really long way of saying knowing your numbers. And I want to make sure I drive that home because knowing your numbers is a direct tie to knowing your profitability, your utilization, your staffing needs, your growth edge, your growth trajectory. It tells you everything you need to know in your business, except for, are you aligned to your value prop?
And that is exactly where I was going to take the next portion of this conversation, because the reality is you are going to find some deals where you couldn't figure out why you closed or you couldn't get a deal. That's going to happen, right? You're going to find those mysteries like we feel like we did everything right and we just didn't make an impact. But you're also going to find that whenever we are doing X, we lose, like whatever that is. And it's probably going to tie to, and you're going to think this is a broken record because Kevin and I talk about this all the time. It's probably tied to your ideal client profile and your value proposition that's tied to that ideal client profile. You might find that they aren't your favorite customer. And a couple of weeks ago, we had a conversation where I said, all you need to do to figure out who your ideal client profile is, at the very simplest way, is go talk to your 5 favorite customers and figure out why they're your 5 favorite customers. If you can figure that out and just call on more people like that. What you could also figure out is everybody we always lose and we worked really hard and we still lost. Go talk to them and you're going to find out that they're probably a lot different than your 5 favorite. They're probably, just guessing here, they're probably not your ideal client profile anymore. And you probably shouldn't be going after them. And spend that time that you're trying to close that deal that you shouldn't close, that you have no business closing. Spend that time prospecting for more customers that are just like your ideal client profile. And your win rate was going to go up. So I know that sounds simple. I know that sounds a little bit flip, but the reality is that is how you grow your sales revenue.
And it's interesting when you think about growth doesn't have to be complex and full of algorithms and high-end, really custom strategies and solutions. Often simple is smooth and smooth is fast. When I think about doing the simple things well, that looks like doing a deal review. It also looks like if you're in the RFP space where you have to do a lot of RFPs, RFPs are tough. They have a historically low rate when you don't do them a lot, but there's a key to doing an RFP. And the key is having an RFP team, having a go, no-go decision. There are whole industries that only do RFPs, so there's something to that. And if you often find yourself saying, we never win those, you should probably dig a little deeper and find out why. So if that's the kind of thing that trips your trigger, is I'm trying to understand how to sell more in your business, how to find more ideal clients, and how to have a higher win rate. That's a pretty good, compelling case for you to come over and join the B2B Sales Lab. That's where we would take a situation like you have personally that you don't maybe want to describe on LinkedIn, bring it to the Sales Lab, bring it to the office hours, and let us triage that with you and with your peers who are also fighting similar battles and work through those problems. That's why that platform exists. It's private, it's safe, it's not going to be publicize your problems to the world. It's iron sharpening iron for sellers like you and sales leaders like you. We'd love to have you there, and we think you probably add a lot of value to yourself and to your team just by joining. So All that to say, doing deal reviews when you lose is super important. And Sean, I think we'll go on a limb here. I think we probably owe it to the audience to do one where we talk about doing deal reviews when you win, because that is equally as informative to talking about winning more of the right deals.
And let's think about that for a future week. Maybe you should just subscribe to Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. It's on that podcast player that you got right there. Hit the subscribe button. And we'll be back next week at 4:30. And we might be talking about that next week. We'll see.
That was a sharp episode because Sean and Kevin took one of the most common sales excuses. We lost on price and refused to let it stand without inspection. One of the most useful ideas in this conversation was the importance of knowing where in the sales process you actually lose: scoping, proposal, proof of concept, quoting, negotiation, or some other defined stage. That distinction matters because a deal lost in discovery tells you something very different from a deal lost after proposal, and treating those losses as the same problem leads to bad sales management decisions. If you do not know the stage, the dollar value, and the pattern behind your losses, you are not managing a pipeline. You are narrating one. The significant action from this episode is to review your last 10 serious lost deals and document where each one failed, why the customer said it failed, what you believe the real reason was, and whether the prospect fit your ideal client profile. Do that today before the next meeting, next quote, and next urgent distraction bury the lesson. Lost deals are expensive, but unexamined lost deals are worse because they quietly teach your team nothing. If you need help with sales, sales management, or simply growing your company, reach out to Sean or Kevin. Their contact information is available in the show notes. You can also join the B2B Sales Lab, a community of salespeople and sales leaders working together to answer real sales questions, share practical resources, and help each other make quota. The B2B Sales Lab URL is in the show notes. Subscribe to Two Tall Guys Talking Sales on your favorite podcast player, and make sure you are back for the next new episode when Tuesday rolls around at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. Happy selling!